Hello guys, welcome back to another episode of Android application development tutorial. In today's episode we are going to learn about how to working with Android SQLite database. So here is a simple application that will demonstrate all the basic database operations like insertion, deletion, updation, etc. So this application contain almost all the basic databases operations. So we are going to learn each of these operations in separate videos. So in this video I am going to show you how to create a database in SQLite and how to add informations into the database. So when user click the add contact button, this will display another activity that contain contact name, mobile number and email address. So after filling this form, if the user click the save button, we have to save all these informations into the Android SQLite database. So create this application in Android Studio. Here is the activity, here is the main activity layout. This is the launcher activity. So whenever user select this add contact button, we have to open this activity. In this activity there is contact name, mobile number and email address. So here I already create all the GUI parts of these applications. So now we have to create the necessary coding for performing the databases operations. So first we have to set up the database. So here I am going to create a contract class. So the purpose of the contract class is the contract class acts as a container for all the constants needed for working with the database. So whenever you need to change something in future, then you can make the changes more easier using the contract class. So the first step, we have to create the necessary contract classes. So here I am going to add a new Java class on the package. So right click the package and create a new Java class. And here I name it as user contract. Okay, and click OK. Okay, now we got a new class called user contract. So if you need more than one table in your database, then you have to create separate static inner classes on the contract class to working with the table. So the contract class will define the overall structure of your database. So if there is multiple tables are needed in your application, then you have to create separate classes for representing each of these tables. So here in this application we need only one table. So here I am going to create a class that will represent our table in the database. So public static is an abstract class. I name it as new user info. Okay, so now you have to define all the needed constants in this class. So here we have to save informations like the user contact name, mobile number and email address. So we have to save only 3 variables. So here I am going to declare that variables. So public static final string. The first one is the username. So username, and here I am going to represent the column name in the table. So this is a key which is used in our program, and the right side will represent the column name, the name of the column in the table, and I name it as user name. Okay, this is static. Now we have to define the second variable. So public static final string. Now we have to define a variable for saving the user mobile number. So user mobile equal to and here I name the column name as user user mobile, and finally we need another variable for saving the user email. So public static final string user email, and make the column name as user email. Okay, and one more thing, we need a name for our table. So here I am going to define another constant that will represent the table name, public static final string table name. So here I name the table as user info. Okay, so here I just create an abstract inner class on the inner contract class, and I declare all the needed constants inside the inner class. Okay, now we have to create another Java class for the database operations. So for performing the database operations, you can use the SQLite helper class, SQLite open helper. So here I am going to create another Java class. So I click the package and create another Java class, and here I name it as user db helper, and extends this class using SQLite open helper, this one. So the SQLite open helper will give some methods to perform the database's operations, but if you want to interact with the database, you can use the SQLite database object. Okay, so you have to override some methods here. So implement the methods. So you have to override on create method and on upgrade method, and click OK. So now we got two methods, on create and on upgrade. So in this the system will call the on create method if the table is not already exist. That means if the database is created for the first time, the system will call the on create method. And if you perform the database's operations again, the system will check whether the database versions or the table is already exist. Then it will not call the on create method again. Okay. So this class need a constructor. There is no public constructor available in this class. There is no default constructor is available for this class. So we have to create some constructor here. So public, I name it as user. This is the constructor. There is no need for name, the same as class name. Okay, and here I provide an argument for this class, say context object. Name it as context. Of course, you need to call the superclass constructor here using the super keyword. And before going to call the super keyword, you have to define another two variables. Here we need a name for the database, and we have to specify some database versions. So here I am going to define another two variables, private static final string database name. I name it as user info db. Yeah, user info dot db. Okay, and now we have to define some database versions. So private static final int I name it as database versions. I put the value 1 for database versions, not versions, database version. Okay, Now we can call the superclass method, superclass constructor on the constructor of this class. So super, and in this method you have to pass three arguments. First one is the context object, second one is the database name, the third one is the there is four constructor. First one is the context object, second one is your database name, third one is if you use any cursor factory object you have to pass the cursor factory object, and final argument is the database version. So first here I have to pass the context object. So here in this constructor we already define a context argument, so use that argument. And next one you have to specify the database name. So database name, now you have to specify any cursor factory object. So here we don't have any cursor factory object, so specify null. And finally you have to specify the database version. So specify database version. So if you create an object of this class with a context argument, then this will create the database if the database is not existing. So the system will check the database version. If the database version is not changed, is remain the same, the system will not create the database, instead it open the database. And if there is a change in the database version, the Android system will again recreate the database. Okay, so after creating this database we have to display some log message, log e. First we have to specify some tag, database operations, and display the message database created or open. Okay, so now we successfully create the database. Now we have to create a table inside the database. So you can create the table in the onCreate method, and for creating the table you need an object of SQLiteDatabase. So inside this onCreate method we already have an SQLiteDatabase object as an argument. Okay, so now here I'm going to create the database. So we have to define the query. So here I am going to define the query for creating the table. So private static final string, I name it as create query. Now here I am going to write the query for creating the database. It's very important, you have to take extra care while you write the query. Many of the users make mistakes while creating the query. It's very important. So here I am going to create the query for creating the table on this database. So first we have to use create table and put a space here. If you do not put the space here, it is not keyword. So always make sure that a space is available after table. Okay, now you have to specify the table name. We got the table name from the contractor class. So on the contractor class we define the table name inside this. Where is the contractor class? Yes, this one. So we already defined the constants inside the inner class called the new user info. Our table name is user info. You can use this variable for table name. So go back to db user db helper. Okay, here we have to specify the table name. So call the inner class new user info dot table name. Okay, now we have to put a bracket for specifying the columns. Now we have to specify the first column name. So new user info dot, our first column name is username. So username. Now we have to specify the data type of this column. So it is represent a text. So put a space here and specify the data type. and put a comma operator for specifying the next column. Now we have to specify the next column. So new user info dot, our second column is user email, user mobile. Now we have to specify the data type, put a space here and specify the data type as text, put the comma operator. Now we have to specify the last column name. So new user info, our last column name is user email. Now specify the data type text. Now we have to close the brackets and put a semicolon, and finally close this statement with the semicolon. Okay, this is very important. While you create this query, you have to make sure that you will put some spaces on appropriate places. Okay, so now we have the query. Now we have to create this table using the onCreate method. So inside this onCreate method, here I am going to create the table. So for creating this table, by using the SQLiteDatabase object and call the execute SQL method and specify the query name here. Here the query name is create query. So after creating the table, we have to display some log message. With the tag database operations, change the message into table created. Okay, so now we create the database and also we create the table inside the onCreate method. Now we have to define some method for inserting the data. So you can define your own method for the insertion or deletion. So here I am going to create a method for inserting data, public void. I name the method as add informations, and we need some arguments for this method. First we have to specify the username, second we have to specify the user mobile, third we have to specify the user email. Also we need an object of the SQLite database here. So SQLiteDatabase DB. Okay, so whenever user call this method, we have to insert some informations into the table. Okay, so in SQLiteDatabase, the data are inserted in the form of a map values, where the keys are represented by the column names. So for creating the map values, we have to create an object of content values. So create an object of content values, name the object as content values, and create the object here, new content values. Now we have to add each of these informations into the content value object. So content values dot, use the put keyword. First you have to specify the key. So we can get the key from the contract class. So new user info dot, our first column name is username, and specify the data. Here the data is get from the argument name. Okay, and insert the second value, content values dot put, specify the key. Key is get from the new user info inner class. The second column name is user mobile, and here the data is get from the variable mobile. And the third column is the email, content values dot put new user info dot user email, and here the data source is email. Okay, And finally, we have to put all these informations into the database. We have to save all these informations into the database. So we have to call insert method using the SQLiteDatabase object. So db.insert, and this method need three arguments. First one is the table name, second one is null column hack, third value is the content value object. Okay, so use that method. First we have to specify the table name. Get the table name from the inner class contract class new user info dot table name. The second argument, you have to specify at least one null column name. If there is some columns that is capable of holding null values, you have to specify at least one column name. This is for if the content value is empty. Suppose if there is no data is available on the content values, then if you specify some column name, null column names, the Android system will put some null values if the content value is empty. Otherwise, if you put null instead of the column name, the Android system will not update a row, or it will not insert a new row if the content value is empty. That is the purpose of this second argument. And the final argument is the what is the final argument? First one is the table name, second one is the null column field, and final one is the content value object. So you have to specify the content value object here. So after executing all these statements, we successfully insert one row of data into the table. So here also we have to display some log message. If there is no exceptions are occur, this log message will display on the logcat window. So one row is inserted. One row insert. Okay. Now we have to add informations into the database. So go back to the new contact layout.xml file. So user insert informations using this activity using this layout. So the button on click method is add contact. So go to the new contact activity.java file. We have to define that method here. So public void add contact, and specify the view class argument here. Okay, here we need some variables. First we need an object of context. Second we need an object of the user db helper class. So user db helper, I name it as user db helper. And finally we need an object of the SQLite database. So SQLite database, I name it as SQLite database. So whenever user fill all the forms, and after user, if the user click the save button, this method will invoke add contact. This method will invoke. So first here I am going to get all the informations from the edit text field. First is name, string name equal to contact name dot get text, convert that one into string. Second is the mobile, contact mobile dot get the text, and finally is the user email, string email contact email dot get text, and convert this one into string. Okay, now we have all these informations. Now we have to perform the database insertion. Okay, so first we have to initialize the user db helper object. So here I am going to initialize the context object with this. Okay, So first here I am going to initialize the user DB object. So user DB helper equal to new user DB helper and pass the context object. Okay, now we have to initialize the SQLite database object. So SQLite database equal to and use the user DB helper object and user DB helper object dot get writable database. Here we are going to specify we are going to done a writing operation. So use this method get writable database. Okay, now we have to add informations into the database. So user DB helper and call the add informations method and specify the data. First one is name, second one is mobile, third one is email, and finally you have to pass the SQLite database object. This will insert one row of data into the database, and finally we have to close the database. So before going to close the database, display a message using toast, get the base context, one row data saved. Okay, and specify the length for the toast. So toast dot make it into long, and finally visible, make it visible. And after finishing all these activities, we have to close the database. So user db helper dot call the method called close. Okay, now we complete all the coding for inserting some symbol data into the SQLite database. Now this is the time to check the application. So now I am going to run this application. Okay, now we have the application available on the virtual device. I click the add contact button. So this will display another activity. So here I am going to specify a name, Prabish, and specify some mobile number. Also we have to specify some email ID, prabish123 at gmail.com. Okay, now before going to click the save button, we have to set up the logcat window. Here is the logcat window in Android Studio, so we can monitor the database status in this logcat window, and click the save button. So the data is saved. Yeah, so inside the logcat window you can see here the messages. So here is the message that will display database is created. So the database is successfully created, there is no exceptions. And here is the another message, log message, the table is created, and here is the final message, one row is inserted. So all these operations are success. We create the database and we create the table, and finally we insert one row of data. So now I clear all these logcat window again. Now here I am going to add another data. So change this data. So now we already insert one row of data. Okay, now I am going to add another row of data, Rupesh. So here the database is already created and the table is already created. So if you add another row of data, the table is not create again. So that means the onCreate method is called when you create the database for the first time. So add a name, add a mobile number 1234534. Okay, and specify some email address 321 at Yahoo. And when I click the save button, here you can see here the database is created or open. That means the database is open for the data insertion, and after it will insert one row of data. That means here the onCreate method is not called again. That means the database, and the system will check the database versions and the table name. That means it is already available in the database, so the system will not call the onCreate method again. So I hope you enjoy this video. This is how we insert some simple informations into the Android SQLite database. So in the next episode we are going to get back all the we are going to read all these informations from the database and display all these informations in a list view. Thank you for watching. See you in the next episode.